So, can we use our higher guidance in these things?
Yes, so you need to meditate to make a connection to your higher self.
And how can we do that? Just through meditation, or is
Just
it
by making time for it every day. You see, whatever you put your attention on is what's going to expand in your life. If you simply take some time to meditate every day where you say, this is my time with my higher self, something will grow there.
Okay. So our higher self, is that like our connection to the source, or is it like a lower level down in that?
It's in between. See, the source divides in certain layers. It's like from source to where we are. It isn't just one step. So the stepping stones in between. Our higher self is like the greatest we can reach for in this life, but that is only one stepping stone to the source.
And it is part of us. It's not like a spirit guide or anything.
More than we are part of it.
We are part of it. Okay.
See, the higher self is aware of all your lifetimes at once.
All
these different lifetimes are just parts of the experience of the higher self.
And does the higher self have a life? Does that make sense?
You're one of its lives. You see, the higher self is beyond time and space. It scatters itself through its creation to experience it all.
Okay.
And what you are doing is experiencing one piece of that creation, one particular time and space.
Okay.
The other lifetimes are different aspects of your higher self.
Interesting. How can we manifest things? I know you manifest things out of your hands.
Well, that takes a bit of time. I mean, there's quite a high level of vibration to reach for that to happen, but first of all, manifestation isn't about manifesting things out of thin air. It's about letting things come into your life that you want, which can happen in a natural way. Anybody can do this just by visualising and trusting.
And what are angels, and how can we work with them?
An angel, basically, is an upper world being. It's a certain stage of creation. Angels are the guardians of the basic forces of creation. So they're very powerful forces, actually. So we need to work with them. One needs to learn some of the old techniques of sacred language and so on, so you can actually reach the vibration to kind of link to them.
So it's a very real realm that these angels inhabit.
Oh yes.
Because to me, when I hear the word angels, it's like these New Age people who are believing in something that's not really real. But
well, quite often it does become very wishy-washy because they don't have the techniques to really work with it. So you have to use the ancient languages and the right spells, the right invocations to these angels. They're very powerful forces working with you.
Okay. What is the mythical mind?
It's way beyond the rational mind. There's part of our mind which doesn't work rationally, but does work according to myths. That's why myths have a certain power. People learn about myths because these have an effect on you. And these myths are built up inside you and affecting the way you behave, not in a rational way. But so they have a very deep and profound effect on how you act.
Have you got an example of a myth that people believe in and act on?
Well, even if they've never heard of the myth, it can be acting. Like a simple example, one you might find within healing and therapy is the myth of Narcissus and Echo, which is one of the Greek myths where Narcissus, was the one who fell in love with himself, and Echo was the kind of nymph who was being neglected, so she ended up fading away to an echo. That's why she's called it. Echo is named after her. She faded away to nothing through neglect. This carries out in families where you might find you have some narcissistic parents. The child is so neglected they feel like they're faded away to nothing. And this is how it gets passed on, and that child later has similar patterns. It gets passed on in the family. So you must see the myth acting within the family.
And
you can't find a start of it. There's a myth which is within that genetic line that's acting out. And that kind of thing we have to heal on the genetic level for that whole family to change.
So you mentioned these ancient languages, Sanskrit. Now that doesn't get used by any people these days, does it?
It's still used in religious services in India. It's not actually Indian. It's a sacred language. It's only spoken in religious rituals.
Right.
And in the Hindu and yoga, it's the language that's used in all the magic.
And you've mentioned before that these languages are stored in our brain, in our DNA.
Yes, the shapes of the letters actually are shaped in neuropeptide chains within our brains.
Right. So is this why when I was doing point holding the other day, I turned on the Kali music and the intensity got far more?
That's right, it's triggering these templates built inside you.
So that to me made this Kali thing you talk about a lot more real in the Sanskrit language.
Yes,
and
see how it
I realised there is power in that then.
That's right.
What spiritual practices that people do can open you up to negative forces if they're not done properly?
Well, any spiritual practice shouldn't do that, but it is when you open yourself without a spiritual discipline you have problems, like drugs for instance. People use drugs to open, but they don't know what they're opening to. They can lead to all kinds of negative entities.
So people who smoke a lot of dope might do it because they think they're being spiritual in some way?
They're looking for something outside the normal reality and not seeking it in the right place. It'll open them, but then it opens to, all kinds of garbage. It opens up to cholesterol in general, which can be negative and positive.
So even magic mushrooms can be the same as well?
Yes, all these things need to be taken in a sacred way.
So we need to really learn that in our culture, don't we?
Yes.
It's more than just abuse of these things. We have to respect them and
That's right.
and work with them.
Yes, because they can affect you, therefore they need to be respected.
Just talk about some of the things that you've healed or tried to heal. I like to talk about AIDS. Have you ever tried to cure anyone with AIDS?
I wouldn't say try to cure. I mean, it's like when I'm working with anybody, I'm not actually looking at a cure for any specific illness. I'm always looking at the whole person, give them healing and seeing where it goes. Yeah, but there have been people who have been relieved of AIDS. Now, I can't really say if it's actually a cure, because we're not actually seeing if there's a virus left or what, but they're certainly healthy. They're going to have quality of life for years to come.
And what was the difficulties in trying to cure people with AIDS? Because I know it's one of the hardest ones.
Actually, it's not.
No?
No, I find the cause of it is generally shame. Clear the shame out and everything improves. People, I've had people very seriously ill with AIDS, and it's like you start point holding, all the organs regenerate, everything becomes healthy, and they have quality of life back.
And the AIDS is gone?
Can't really say. It's like I'm not looking for a virus.
Right.
And to tell the truth, I don't really care if the virus or not. That's not what I'm looking at. So the person's overall health.
The most important thing is they feel a lot better after.
They're healthy and they're alive. What more do you want?
Yeah. And what about motor neuron disease? What's the cause of that, and how do you cure that?
I found that as a huge energy leak in the heart chakra. All the life force is draining away, and that's where they start coming out and losing the nervous system. And quite often there's been a very deep emotional pain, and something just split inside, and energy's all leaking away. And quite often that can actually lead to an entity that's in the heart, consuming the vital energy.
So your first job there is to go and get the negative entity out?
That's right, and then we have to heal that deep wound. It requires some very deep emotional healing.
And is that done by point holding?
Yep, it can be part through point holding and part through forms of shamanic healing as well.
What about multiple sclerosis? Because a lot of people think there's no cure for that.
No, I've had a few multiple sclerosis patients coming out walking out of wheelchairs.
Multiple sclerosis, that's the one where the nerves, the kind of protective coating of the nerves is damaged.
It begins with small crystals forming in the brain and the spinal cord. And these crystals are, like all the crystals in the body, are forms of emotional suppression. Basically, the basic thought behind it is they've lost their nerve.
Alright.
So you can see there's a fear pattern here, there's a lack of courage, there's some disappointment.
So they may be carrying this from childhood, they may have had a tough childhood and suppressed this very deeply, and kept on suppressing it for years and years and years.
It's often the case. A lot of the multiple sclerosis patients I've had a very negative condition from childhood would expect life to be a huge struggle, because that's how their childhood always was.
And again, you just do your shamanic techniques, and how do you give people their nerve back then?
You press the points.
Just press the
When
points.
the emotions come out, everything heals. It's that simple.
Can you talk about the herbs that you use, and which particular ones do you use most, and how do you use them?
Well, there's many, but first of all, we have some standard herbs for each organ when it's going through a healing process to help it cleanse. Like we often use dandelion and milk thistle for the liver. Might use berberis for the kidney. Lungworts for the lungs, comfrey for the large intestine.
Okay, so
we have some standard ones we might use with chamomile for the stomach, but obviously it can vary. You can go into more detail with look at the fine points of the herbs.
And how do you administer them? Do you just eat that herb, or do you have to prepare it in a special way?
Quite often you can just eat it, or you can just make a tea out of it.
Okay. Can you talk about the flower essences that you make and the power behind them?
These flower essences are vibrational. We simply take the flowers, we place them on floating face down in a shallow dish of water in the sunlight for a few hours, and we kind of play with it. So the spirit of the flower blesses the water. So simply using the energy and the consciousness of the flower rather than anything chemical.
But it must depend then on your level of prayer, your training and
it always
expertise.
helps, but anybody can make a flower essence, but obviously if you're more in tune with the flower, you can get it to put more power into it.
Okay. Well, thanks again for your time, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.